This is the story of a young woman who was sitting in a synagogue while the Ten Commandments were being read. It's the story of a young woman who experienced a revelation that morning that was both challenging and ultimately empowering. Here is what happened. The Torah reader was chanting so expertly that the young woman felt as though she was hearing the Aseret HaDibrot, the Ten Commandments, for the first time from God, God's self. And given that, she was astonished by what she heard, and her heart became aggrieved. She asked in her heart about the mitzvah of observing Shabbat, Zechor et Yom HaShabbat l'Kadsho, of which it says, "You shall do no work, neither you, nor your son, nor daughter, nor your beast. Ata uvincha uvitecha avdecha v'amatecha." Wait a minute, she said to herself. What about his wife? The Torah only refers to ata, singular masculine, you, not at, singular feminine. Is she not commanded to observe Shabbat? The young woman thought. And what about the last commandment? You shall not covet, lo tachmod, of which it says, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his ox, or his donkey. And the young woman thought, what about his wife? Does the Torah not prohibit her from coveting too? Now understand, she was not asking mischievously as if to say, you mean we are allowed to covet? She was asking out of confusion and a touch of sorrow, what about us? The young woman was pious, and until that day she had never doubted the truth of the Torah. But at that moment, her heart was wrapped in fear, beating and beating, until she thought that everyone in shul could hear its rhythm. The tears that rose in her throat had the taste of the deep, the taste of the sea that drowned the Egyptians, and she was shaking aghast, so that her soul fled. The Holy One of Blessing gathered up her soul in the palm of God's hands and was looking and smiling at her. And God said to her, before I continue the story, let me share a few words of introduction. This story is a modern midrash written by Tamar Biala in a book that she edited called Dirshuni, Contemporary Women's Midrash. I introduced the book when it first came out in English back in 2022. It was published in Hebrew in 2018. Biala, like most of the authors, teaches at several women's yeshivot in Israel and in America. Unlike what often passes for modern midrash, these midrashim clearly grow out of deep Torah learning. Groundbreaking in the Orthodox world, they wrestle with contemporary questions through a traditional idiom. I'm turning my attention this morning to exploring the place of women at Sinai for several reasons. First, because I don't know about you, but sometimes I need to just put aside the news and dive into the waters of Torah to feel a sense of renewal. In addition, I hope that this exploration serves to whet your appetite for our upcoming scholar-in-residence with Rabbi Naima Hirsch-Gelman next Shabbat. In my opinion, the most exciting thing happening in the rabbinate today, if not one of the most important things happening in the Jewish world today, is the emergence of Orthodox women rabbis, although they don't always use the term rabbis, as Rabbi Naama does. This legend and this book get to the core of that important evolution that is happening in our day. Finally, I'm drawn to the topic as a way of introducing a conversation and a practice I'd like us here at Bethel to explore. For now, let's return to the Torah, to the story. The young woman is distraught when she comes to realize that God seemingly only addressed the men at Sinai. How long have I waited for you to come and ask me? God said to her. now I might reveal to you that which has been hidden away with me for 3,000 years. The young woman cast her eyes downward and asked, Did the Holy One of Blessing not speak with the women at Mount Sinai? Did you not command us the same things you commanded the men with thunder and lightning? Now, before we hear God's answer to her, let me pause again for some more background. The passages that the young woman noted in the Ten Commandments are clearly addressed to men, suggesting either that women were absent or simply ignored. And it's not just these specific commandments that raise that question. We read in the prologue to the Ten Commandments the description of the Israelites encamped at the base of Har Sinai. God says to Moshe, Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and declare to the children of Israel, Kol tomar lebeit Yaakov v'tagid livnei Yisrael. Now you all know that the Torah is very concise and precise in its language. Why then does the Torah repeat itself? Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and declare to the children of Israel. One medieval commentator, Rabbi Avram Ibn Ezra, correctly recognizes that this is really nothing more than the Torah's poetic style, a biblical parallelism that adds emphasis through repetition. But other rabbinic commentators have a different take. Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob means that Moshe spoke to the ladies, and declare to the children of Israel means that Moshe spoke to the guys too. Well, that's not so bad. The rabbis affirm that the women, they were at Sinai as well. You're not going to like this next part, though. It comes from the Talmud and the medieval rabbis. Why does the commentary associate women with Beit Yaakov, with the house of Jacob, and the men with Bnei Yisrael? Because Yaakov is the inferior name. It's Jacob's old name. It refers to the lowly heel. But the name Yisrael, on the other hand, denotes authority and superiority. The implication is clear. Moshe, speak to the women, but speak only in generalities. Speak to them gently. Speak to them only enough so that they can encourage their sons to go study Torah, for they are better suited to the rigors of deep learning. I told you weren't going to like that part. We should recoil, but at the same time, let's understand that we're talking about the rabbis of the Talmud 2,000 years ago and then medieval rabbis 1,000 years ago, so it's not a great surprise that they don't reflect our egalitarian ethos. Let's now return to the story about the young woman and hear how this contemporary midrash written by Tamar Biala wrestles with the place of women at Sinai. The Holy One of Blessing lifted up the head of the girl and said, When Moshe ascended Mount Sinai, I commanded him, Be ready, for on the third day I will come down before all of the people. Ki bayom hashlishi yired Adonai le'enei kol ha'am. But understand that Moshe had been apart from his wife Zipporah. So rather than gathering kol ha'am, the entire people, at the base of the mountain, he brought only ha'am, just the people, meaning the men. So when Moshe heard the commandment to observe Shabbat, he shared it with the people as Ata, you men should do no work. And actually that's kind of understandable. Not only because it was only the men who were gathered around, the commandment says, you and your servants and your animals. And, of course, in Moshe's day, it was only the men who actually owned and controlled the servants and the animals. So Moshe didn't really think to speak more expansively to the women as well. So too, God continued when it came to coveting. Because Moshe had been apart from Zipporah, and because he was not me'uravim habriot, he was not engaged with people, he forgot that women also covet, and so he left them out of that commandment. Again, let me pause her telling to say that I hope you're hearing the deep sensitivity with which the author of this midrash is approaching the Torah. She's noticing subtle textual variations and using them to develop a radically new interpretation of Torah. Biala offers an historical corrective. According to this reading, God intended all along that women be fully present at Sinai, but God's revelation was partial and incomplete because it was conveyed through humans, that is, through men, fallible as we are. Before sharing the conclusion of the Midrash, I'll say that there's one part of the traditional commentary that I do appreciate. Ko tomar lebeit Yaakov, speak to the women, v'tagid lebnei Israel, and to the men. Today we have, of course, an even more expansive understanding of gender beyond the binary, male and female. Now, I don't know if men are from Mars and women from Venus, but whether by nature or nurture, there are differences in gender. And I appreciate the early rabbi's suggestion that God knew to address them according to the different ways that people hear, carry, and respond to Torah. As a longtime egalitarian synagogue, we proudly highlight Rabbi Aronson and Rabbi Abelson's progressive stance on inviting women to participate in services when it was still quite new for many conservative shuls. Over my 25 years, we have introduced the imahot, adding the matriarchs to our davening, and we introduced talis and tefillin to all of our bar mitzvah students. I don't know what the policy was in earlier days regarding head coverings. Were women required to wear a doily on the bima? Some of you, I'm sure, can tell me at Kiddush. Today, our approach, I have to admit, gives some mixed signals. Officially, we require those who are male identifying to wear kippot and talit in services, let's say on Shabbat, and we encourage those who are female identifying. Now, some of you might feel like the obligation should be exactly the same. Others appreciate the difference and appreciate the freedom to choose. And you can see that some women do and others do not wear kippot and talit. At the same time, they still describe themselves as proud egalitarian and feminist Jewish women. In my experience, wearing a head covering and a talis are important, what I'd call spiritual technologies that inspire my prayer experience and also express the beauty of Shabbos. So I would like to encourage people to experience and to experiment with this practice. That's for your own personal, individual davening. On a communal level, I'm asking myself, how do we show up to honor the Torah when we are given a Torah honor? And so you might have noticed recently that we placed a basket of talitot and kippot by the bima. We're inviting people to wear them when opening the ark or having an aliyah. I would like us to develop a thoughtful and intentional approach to these questions, one that is rooted in Torah, one that honors the Torah, one that reflects our evolving understanding of gender, and also one that respects people's individual choices. There are tshuvot on the topic that I'd like us to study together, and one-on-one conversations with Rabbi Goldberg or myself, we're happy to have those, and Rabbi Schwartzwald, who owns almost a dozen talises, she would love to have those conversations. The question that I'm asking, though, is bigger than do we require everyone on the bima to wear a head covering. It's a question that's being posed in this story. The young woman listened attentively to God, and she came to understand God's revelation on Sinai was incomplete because Moshe had separated himself from his wife. If so, she asked, will a sage who has not separated from women be able to hear the full and complete revelation? The Holy One's countenance became grave. God answered her thus, any Beit Midrash that has no women, my word will not emerge from their whole. You can hear in the end of the story a critique of Jewish communities that limit women's learning opportunities and that strictly separate men and women. The author is calling for and celebrating a revolution in the world of Torah learning, for only when women's voices are heard and studied can God's will fully be known. Shabbat shalom. Same to you. So we'll turn back in our Siddurim to page 155 for the Chatzi Kaddish introducing Musaf.